and welcome back to another episode of Reading Through the Bible. My name is Carl, and today we'll be reading through Matthew 16. All right, we're getting through these one day at a time. Pretty amazing. We're already on the 16th chapter. I was kind of remarking on that. We're almost halfway through Matthew here, and pretty exciting, pretty good book. We've had quite the story so far. Jesus coming into the world and his lineage, and then him going on his ministry, and kind of, teaching the disciples through living with him. Some good stuff, and definitely we've been given a template, what to follow in order to live our lives, and, Christ is the perfect template. So, good stuff. Today's a good day. Today is overcast outside. It was raining earlier, so I couldn't take my walk, unfortunately. However, I do have an inside spin bike, so I was using that. Did half an hour on that and then did my lift and everything. So, unfortunately, I haven't been outside today yet. That usually lifts my spirits a little bit. Go outside, praise the Lord, pray a little bit while I'm walking. Just enjoy the sights and the sounds. Usually around the time that I do it, the kids are out at recess in this school. It's a kitty corner from our house, and so it's nice to hear, kids yelling and laughing and having good time and stuff, and thinking about maybe in a couple years my son will be there. Just breathing in fresh air, getting outside. It's always a good feeling. So, unfortunately, that is not the reason for the good day, however. I have a little progression in my job hunt, which is a really good feeling. Feels like all my hard work has begun to pay off a little bit. And this is after literally being rejected without any kind of, interview or assessment or anything from literally every job that I have applied to in the last almost 3 months. And I know that, in comparative to some other people's journey, that's not bad at all. They put in thousands and thousands of applications and heard nothing back and stuff. So I'm not necessarily complaining about that. I'm just acknowledging that it does take a toll on you. And I'm really happy to have finally, busted through the first wall, so to speak. So let's hope that my momentum continues through the next. And as far as those rejections, like it isn't even every application that I send in. A lot of them are just, they don't answer at all. And either they'll move you to, not under consideration anymore on their website and not send you an email. Or they just won't respond. So rejections on maybe about half of them. So it's not always something that you hear back from. So I'm just praying that this is the right one. It definitely caught my eye as a job that I had a really good fit for. I thought it would be interesting. And so I prayed, about that, and prayed pretty heavily on it and just said, Lord, if this is your will, if this is where you want me to be and I can do the most good for you, then put me here. And so maybe this is his answer. We'll see. We'll find out if I continue along with these. But a couple of thoughts on this. Number one, it's very important to remember what you pray for and give God credit for it, which I think we almost never do, and I am the guiltiest of this. Thankfully, I've kind of tried to start doing that, and so I think it was a couple weeks ago that I prayed this, and so I remembered it for a couple weeks. But sometimes maybe, if you have to keep a list on your phone, in your notes or something, just saying, hey, this is what I prayed for. And then when God, answers your prayer, give him credit for it, because he is faithful. He is there. He's listening. And it's not always on our time. And so if we don't think it comes right away, then we're like, well, God didn't think of me. He didn't remember me. Well, blah, blah. So like I said, I'm the most guilty of that. And so it's important when you do remember and when you do recognize that prayer that you give him credit. Number two is I'm feeling excited. I'm feeling happy. Both my wife and I kind of have come from the school of don't celebrate until you have it in the hand. And I think I wasn't always that way. When I was younger, I was definitely full of, life and ups and downs and roller coasters. And I think I'm going to blame hockey again for this, for a major part of it. It's definitely not all of it. I would think probably drinking alcohol as well had something to do with it. But I have become a person who just doesn't feel emotion either way, up or down. And I think that I've kind of done that to insulate myself, to protect myself from the down times. I don't want to feel down, so I don't let myself feel the ups, because you can't come down if you don't go up, right? And so I'm just even keel the whole time. But that has progressed and permeated its way into my personal life as well, right? And so the feeling that I have for my friends and family isn't as high as it used to be. And despite the fact that I love my wife and my son, I don't feel that I'm experiencing that love as greatly as I could. And I think that, that love comes from God, and, I shouldn't personally repress that. And so this is like something that I've been thinking about a while and praying for a while, because it's a very difficult thing once you get into this mode where there's like no emotion, nothing. It's very hard to get yourself out of it. It's like everything you take in, you have that automatic reaction of like, okay, that's either cool or that's not cool or whatever. And you're just deadpan the whole time, right? So I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm going to allow myself to get excited about this, despite the fact that, it could be shut down tomorrow. They say, you took this assessment and you suck. We don't want you at all. And I'd be like, well, I guess that is, how it goes. Maybe God didn't want me to go there. But I'm going to allow myself to go up on this roller coaster ride, and we'll see where it ends up going. And, I'll keep reporting on how I'm feeling and how that's going. But I really want to make sure that I'm capable of experiencing that love and those feelings and emotions and stuff. That's part of what makes us human. I talked about hockey being an influence before. I think especially with coaching, you're behind the bench and you look up to the influences that are at the top, right? So typically with sports, you look at the professional leagues and on how to act. So you look at the NHL coaches behind the bench, and most of the time they don't even talk, they don't do anything, they don't smile, they don't react. Every once in a while they will, but most of the time they don't. And so that kind of becomes your template on how to act and what to do. And so that, coupled with the fact that my philosophy was, okay, if I'm even keel, then my team will be even keel. If I'm up and down, then my team will be up and down. And I would much rather us be even keel and not get affected by goals against us, and possibly be motivated by goals for. So you kind of get a little bit of the upside, but none of the downside, ideally, was my thought process. But I don't know how well that worked out. And so I'm abandoning that along with hockey. And I'm ready to kind of jump back out with my heart first. I've always kind of had a warm heart, but not been able to show it as well as I needed to in, I would say the last decade or so. I think that alcohol has something to do with that. I think that it deadens the nerves, it deadens emotions, it deadens the ability to love. I think that it just puts you in this state where, everything's exciting for a while, and then over time, nothing's exciting. And you just, basically lose out on all that ability to experience anything new, have fun, that kind of thing, because you're always looking for the next big thing. And if it's not bigger or better, then it's not worth it. And you end up just kind of in this downward spiral. So I'm happy to get rid of that as well. I occasionally have some red wine now, but not drinking like I used to. And usually when I do have the red wine, I cut it with water. I've always thought that wine back in the day was less alcohol content than it is today. I think it's pretty concentrated. And to be honest with you, putting water in it, it's pretty tasty. I think it's a little too strong when I just drink it straight out of the bottle. It also doubles the amount that I can drink. It also hydrates you. So for me, that's the way that I drink it. A lot of people are probably gasping right now, being like, how dare you? In fact, I did it the other day with my parents out at dinner, and my mom was like, wow, we just put water in our wine. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? I'm just breaking all the rules. And then my dad asked for a sip, and he put his straw in it. So we're just, we're not observing any of the rules in that context. But I digress. That's kind of my thought process right now. So I'm really excited. I'm super happy today, even though maybe you can't see it. I'm hoping that eventually that comes. Also with the change in emotion is the excitement, because I've definitely, in the past been excited and shown that excitement and stuff. And I, not saying that I don't want to be even keel. I think there's definitely a benefit and, positives to that. But certainly when you're excited, when you're down, I think it's valid to also show those, and get support from others. And so that helps build relationships as well, which, as I said, this channel is geared towards doing. So that is that. We're going to go to Matthew 16, the demand for a sign. This one has some good stuff. No miracles and stuff from Jesus, but some good discourse. So we'll read through it. We'll talk about it. And before we do, let's go ahead and pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for, Lord, just you sending your Son down to teach us how to live, to heal us, Lord, and to be our salvation, our sacrifice on the cross for our sin. Lord, we ask you to help us to pick up our crosses every single day, to deny the sin that would put us in a prison, and to draw us closer to you, Lord. Open our hearts to your word. Speak through me with the Holy Spirit, Lord, and give us your strength. In Jesus' righteous holy name, amen. All right, Matthew 16, the demand for a sign. The Pharisees and Sadducees came to Jesus and tested him by asking him to show them a sign from heaven. He replied, "When evening comes, you say, 'It will be fair weather, for the sky is red,' and in the morning, 'Today it will be stormy, for the sky is red and overcast.' You know how to interpret the appearance of the sky, but you cannot interpret the sign of the times. A wicked and adulterous generation looks for a sign, but none will be given it except the sign of Jonah." Jesus then left them and went. The yeast of the Pharisees and Sadducees. When they went across the lake, the disciples forgot to take bread. "Be careful," Jesus said to them. "Be on your guard against the yeast of the Pharisees and Sadducees." They discussed this among themselves and said, "It is because we didn't bring any bread." Aware of their discussion, Jesus asked, "You of little faith, why are you talking among yourselves about having no bread? Do you still not understand? Don't you remember the 5 loaves for the 5,000 and how many basketfuls you gathered? Or the 7 loaves for the 4,000 and how many basketfuls you gathered? How is it that you don't understand that I was not talking to you about bread? But be on your guard against the yeast of the Pharisees and Sadducees." Then they understood that he was not telling them to guard against the yeast used in bread, but against the teaching of the Pharisees and Sadducees. Peter declares that Jesus is the Messiah. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say the Son of Man is?" They replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets." "But what about you?" he asked. "Who do you say I am?" Simon Peter answered, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." Jesus replied, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." Then he ordered his disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Messiah. Jesus predicts his death. From that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed and on the 3rd day be raised to life. Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. "Never, Lord," he said, "this shall never happen to you." Jesus turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns." Then Jesus said to his disciples, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it. What good will it be for someone to gain the whole world yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? For the Son of Man is going to come in his Father's glory with his angels, and then he will reward each person according to what they have done. Truly I tell you, some who are standing here will not taste death before they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom." All right, that's the word of the Lord. Praise be to God. I'm going to adjust this a little bit. Okay, there we go. I was slouching a little bit, so now I can sit up a little bit straighter and feel like I'm speaking straight into the mic. Okay, so if you notice in there, and we'll get to this in a little bit, he did mention the 2 times that he did miracles, the bread, and the 5,000 and the 4,000. And so I was wrong yesterday, and that is not the same story, misremembered or retold or anything. That's confirmation right there that he did do it twice. So pretty wild that the disciples didn't recognize that, but hey, as we can see, he has to continually do the same things over and over. And it makes sense for humans too. If you think about it, there's a saying, repetition is the tool of learning. And it's true. Like, what do they say? You have to do something 10,000 times to be a master at it. And so for humans, it has to happen over and over again. We don't necessarily get it the first time. So Jesus doing these things over and over, makes us understand and recognize. So Pharisees and Sadducees, again, demanding a sign. As we said, this is probably the same group of guys. Could be a different group, but for sure they had known what the other group had asked, and they're asking Jesus again for a sign. Jesus says to them, hey, you can interpret, that the weather is like this, but you can't interpret the sign of the times. Is like, you won't get any sign except the sign of Jonah, which is what I said before, or what Jesus said before. And the sign of Jonah is him being in the earth for 3 days and his resurrection, basically. And Jonah is the same. We'll read through that. That's in the Old Testament. That's he got swallowed by a fish for 3 days and then spat out. So this one was reading through some of my commentary, look through my study Bible as well, and it was talking about that people who are stubborn are already set. No miracle sign is going to help them. Like, they've already seen that Jesus has healed all these different people, and there's no way that any human could have done that without the presence of God. And they've explained all that away. So what are they going to do when he gives them a sign, from heaven, so to speak? They're going to, he did that by the prince of demons, or he did that by sleight of hand, or he did this and that, So they're not going to believe regardless, right? They're stubborn. They've already decided. The other thing is that Jesus is the sign of heaven. Like, if you're looking, and this is, a big thing I talk about, like, hey, look into the world and just the weather, for example, and see that God is all around us. But truly, God is in every single aspect of life, and it's all about perspective, right? You can look at the world and just be like, oh, well, some big bang happened and evolution and all that kind of stuff. That's one perspective, and explain away God, like the Pharisees and the Sadducees do. Or you can look and see God everywhere in nature, in our lives, inside of us, how intricate our eyes are specifically, which Darwin said, like, there's no way that could have evolved from nothing, right? There is a creator, and you just have to be looking for him. It's perspective. Jesus is the sign, as I said, and God has given us the sign that is Jesus, and he performed all these miraculous signs, but they weren't looking for it. They didn't realize that Jesus is the sign. That's why he's able to perform all these miracles. So that's another thing that I thought about, and I was like, that's interesting, because Jesus is always with us in our lives, right? Unseen everywhere, but he's with us, walking with us. And it's important that God has given us that miracle. He's given us that sign that Jesus is in our lives. He's with us. And so we have to appreciate that. And we, a lot of times we kind of use God as our genie in the sky, myself included. Lord, give me a job, please, support our family, Lord, show us where to go, etc. And his sign is already here. It's Jesus with us. We don't need anything else, right? And he will help us out with, with things that we pray for earnestly. But, I kind of talked about that a little while ago, that he won't give us anything that isn't good for us, or that we, can't handle at this point, right? Like, I'm not praying for $1 million, but if I am, chances are I'm not ready for that. And that's not from the true believing heart, right? It's just, I want to use God as a genie, right? So very important to make those distinctions. And that Jesus is with us. He is the sign from heaven, and he's all we'll never ever need. So then at the end here, Before that, a wicked and adulterous generation looks for a sign. Interesting little tidbit from the commentary here that I didn't realize. I was like, why does he call them adulterous? Right? Are these guys like, going sleeping with married women or something? No, it's because they're divorced from the church, basically. The church, Jesus is setting up the church, and we're to be the bride of the church. And they're going away from the church and Jesus. And so that's why he calls them adulterous, which I thought was interesting. Because I don't tend to think in the terms of we are the church, we're the body of the church, and we are Christ's bride. As a man, that one's always been really tough for me to wrap my head around. And so, as I hear it more and as I, walk deeper in my faith, I'm able to, come to terms with that more and more. But, just hearing that I'm the bride of Christ is kind of like, I don't know if I want to be the bride of Christ. Can I be the man? What are we doing here? So interesting there. And then he also says at the end, Jesus then left them and went away. Very important to note this, that he basically is saying, I'm leaving you to your own devices, right? Like the own desires of your heart. You're steeped in that way, and I'm not going to change that, obviously, so I'm leaving. Which I think is a little bit of a template for us when we're trying to witness to somebody, because there's people with open minds and open hearts, and you know who those are, and then there's people who are just completely shut off, right? I'm going to use an example where my neighbor, again, he was discussing the Philistine, why can't I think? Gaza and Israel war, and Palestine. There we go. My brain's awesome today. And so he was arguing with this guy who clearly had just already had his mind made up. He was, he had an infographic on, the Palestine side of the war, and all that. So this person, they're not going to change their mind, right? And you understand that when you go. Now, that's not to say that God can't change their heart later on, and that maybe you're planting a seed, and then over time that seed is like, hey, you know what? Maybe I was wrong. Maybe that wasn't right. But chances are there's a lot of people who have already turned that off and said, my heart is closed to all this. And what does Jesus do? He leaves them. He doesn't sit there and say, what can I do to get you to believe in me? I'm going to do all these signs. I'm going to do all these things. So it's important for us to realize when that happens and when somebody has a closed off heart, and not waste our time on that person. And I think that, here our commission from Jesus at the end of Matthew is to go out and make disciples of all nations. But that also doesn't mean we're standing on the street corner arguing and screaming at somebody who is just completely on the other side and never going to change their mind. Right. So, important things there. Okay, moving on. The yeast of the Pharisees and Sadducees. All right. So another teaching where the disciples show their ignorance, which, hey, that is us. Very important to understand that, hey, we also, see all these things over and over again, and we don't get it until, much later, when Jesus has to take us by the hand and be like, okay, this is what I did, and this is what it means, and you're dumb. And it's true, right? So they forgot to take bread. Apparently this was a cultural ritual. Some of the times when they went across the lake, they'd be going into a desert region, and so they bring bread for their family. And so sort of a plausible thing that they're thinking, oh, it's because we didn't bring any bread. But it is kind of silly, right? I'm sure Jesus used the word yeast on purpose, for them to think that way. And were there any of them who thought, maybe it's not the yeast there, maybe it's something else? Nope. So, aware of the discussion, Jesus, you of little faith, why are you talking among yourselves about having no bread? Jesus, I think, this is the first time I'm really reading into the words that he said and the context and how he says it. And it's not necessarily nice, right? Like, you of little faith, wicked and adulterous generation, things like that. If you heard that, you'd kind of be taken aback. Like, our culture is built on being nice, but not necessarily kind, right? We sugarcoat everything because people just can't take it, which they can, but because we sugarcoat everything, there's less and less ability to actually take it, right? Got to treat everybody like a princess or a prince, right? And it's just silly. There's a difference between being nice and kind. Nice is the niceties where you sugarcoat things and you say things nicely, and you have the feedback sandwich where you say something good and then you give them constructive criticism and then you say something good again so they feel good about themselves, right? Whereas kindness is where you give them what they actually need. You tell them the truth and you do it in a supportive way, right? And so that is what Christ is. And I think it's important for us to follow that as our template. Now, am I advocating that you go around to everybody and just be like, you of little faith, how do you know? Of course not, right? We need to be culturally sensitive at times, but especially when you're teaching, I think that it's important to call people out and to, be honest about sin, the fear of God, and the love of God, right? But the importance that you're actually getting to the truth and the heart of the matter. So kindness is important. Yes. Niceness, I don't think so. And as I'm getting older, that's something that I'm kind of understanding more and leaning into is that, hey, I don't need to be liked by everybody, but I'm going to love and support everybody. And sometimes that means that I'm yelling at somebody, or sometimes that means that I'm telling somebody something they don't want to hear in a way they don't want to hear so that they actually end up listening, right? They actually end up listening. So interesting the way that he talks to his disciples. We would think of it today's age as being like, oh, how dare you say that to me? And then the message would be lost on us, right? So important to understand your audience. If you are talking to people who are snowflakes, then maybe you do use a little niceties, but kindness is much more important, right? All right, so why are you talking among yourselves about having no bread? You still not understand. Do you not remember the 5 loaves for the 5,000 or the 7 loaves for the 4,000, right? So he does do this twice. And right, they gather basketfuls of bread. How do you not understand? I was not talking to you about bread, but be on your guard against the yeast of the Pharisees and Sadducees. I can imagine him saying it like that, like saying it again, but hey, think about what I'm saying. And then they're like, oh, sorry, that was a little loud. Let me try that again. Oh, right. Our cat's on the windowsill. They heard that one too. Yeah, he gets them to actually understand by explaining it again, but not fully, right? And so be on guard against the teaching of the Pharisees and Sadducees. Very important. So actually, one thing that's interesting to me, I don't know if we've defined these two groups yet, but I think that repetition is a tool of learning, so why not define them again? My study Bible went through this again, so it's on my mind. Pharisees were the keepers of the law. They were the keepers of the elders' traditions, and they believed that by doing those things, you get into heaven. So they thought that they actually had the key to heaven. They could keep people out or let them in based on, what they did, right? And the Pharisees believed in resurrection. The Sadducees believed in only the books of Moses, so the Pentateuch, so Genesis, Exodus, Deuteronomy, Leviticus, Numbers, those 5, and they did not believe in the resurrection. So they were very specific things. We don't hear as much about them and their beliefs here as we do about the Pharisees because they're very easy to call out with here. You believe that doing things get you into heaven, and that's not true. But these two groups usually were kind of going at each other, but they found a common enemy in Jesus. And so that's why they were always together trying to trick Jesus, trap him, and eventually kill him. So important to define those two groups and to know the difference between the two, because Paul actually comes into contact with them later on and is able to talk about, something that both of them disagree on, and so they fight each other instead of Paul. So kind of smart in that way. Anyways, Peter declares that Jesus is the Messiah. Excuse me. So this one is, this is it right here. The first time we hear Jesus admit that he is the Messiah. And it's a secret, right? He tells the disciples, no, you can't tell people this, right? Because if it gets out, he's not going to be able to go anywhere, and he's already having trouble going places. So Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, which is Caesarea is obviously Roman. So they've taken over Philippi and they've named it after Caesar. He is asked his disciples, "Who do the people say the Son of Man is?" Very interesting distinction here. The disciples are like, "Oh, they say you're a resurrected prophet." Some say John the Baptist, which is nuts because John the Baptist literally lived at the same time as Jesus. But if you don't know Jesus and you knew of John the Baptist, let's say you're like, somebody who doesn't pay attention to politics or at all, or, whatever, religion in this case, or whatever you want to call it. Maybe you're on the outskirts and you've never seen these people and you're just like, "Oh, I heard of John the Baptist. Yeah, he's a crazy guy. Lived out in the wilderness and ate locusts and honey and stuff like that. Oh, this Jesus guy, oh, he came after John the Baptist, right? John the Baptist disappeared into prison. Jesus came to prominence. Must be the same guy. Probably based off of not having much knowledge. Others say Elijah. Elijah was an Old Testament prophet who, the spirit of Elijah is around, and they use that a lot. So some people think that he came back, right? And others say Jeremiah or one of the prophets. So all these were great prophets back in Israel's day. Isaiah, Micah, right? Ezekiel, right? All those guys. Anyways, so what about you? Who do you say I am? And Simon Peter answers, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." Just comes right out, hits the heart of the matter, and says, Jesus like, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven." Okay, he is the Messiah. Jesus says it plain out right there. So anybody who thinks that Jesus is not the Messiah, okay, or just, a nice guy who is a good teacher and good man, but not the Messiah, you can't think that, because Jesus literally said that he is the Messiah. It's right here in the Bible. Excuse me. And if you think that he's a good man because of that, he's a liar. Right? If you don't think that he's divine and he says he's the Messiah, he's a liar, and then he's not a good person. Right? So if he didn't do all these things, then you can't believe that he's a good person. Right? There's no in the middle with Jesus. It's either he is the Messiah or he's not the Messiah, and he's a terrible person, a liar, a cheat, a steal, and leading a rebellion. That's basically the two little differences there. Differences, big difference, huge difference. And so Jesus is the Messiah. Here you go. Proof right here. If you ever want proof, right there. Matthew 16:17. There you go. And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. So Peter's the rock that he builds the church on. We'll see later on that he becomes a completely different person, a very strong person. He becomes a rock for the church. And the church flourishes because of that. But more on that later to come with Peter and his, just his demeanor and how he is as a person. But certainly you can imagine the type of person Peter is, and he's always the spokesperson for the disciples. Probably a little bit of a talkative guy, likes to talk to everybody. "Oh, hey, how you doing? Oh, in with everybody. And he's the spokesperson for them. So, I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." My study Bible was not very pinpointy on this one. They say there's been arguments about this, or discussions, I should say, about this for generations, talking about what this verse means. Some say it's that, we have the ability to administer the church while we're here on earth and, run the church basically. Probably the most likely one there. And, there were other things as well, but nothing too crazy. So, then he ordered his disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Messiah. Okay. Jesus predicts his death. Yep. He goes in, he says, "I'm going to die. They're going to kill me." And he comes out and says it pretty plainly, not like some of the parables that he uses. Sometimes it's just, he speaks plain, right? And Peter took him aside. He begins to rebuke him. He's like, "Never, Lord, this shall never happen to you." Probably because Peter thought still the Messiah was going to be a militaristic Messiah, or, warlord that takes over Israel and returns it to prominence, and they take over the world and all that, and they're ruling next to Jesus and all that kind of stuff. Like, no, that's not what's going to happen at all. People, you got to realize that I am a servant, that Jesus is a servant, and he's not going to take over the world and lead Israel to militaristic victory. So Jesus turned around and says to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. You do not have in the mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns." Yep. Very important, and a difficult thing for us to do is to keep in mind God and to please God. It's hard, right? We're conditioned to please man. And you'll see kind of going through the next couple books that this is used, sporadically through there, that pleasing God is the goal and not pleasing man. But man, we are conditioned to do that. And so getting out of that is difficult. And really, you have to be on your constant guard and think constantly about pleasing God as opposed to man. Because it's easy to want to change your message or do whatever to fit in and to not stand out and to not draw attention like that. But that's what we're called to do. And then Jesus continues, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves, pick up their cross, and follow me." Right? Every day we have to pick up our cross. We have to deny our sin. Whoever wants to save their life will lose it. Right? Whoever wants to live here on earth in our short 90 years, whatever we have, 100 years, they will lose, your life in heaven. Whoever wants to, or whoever loses their life for me will find it. Right? If you deny the sins of this world, the desires of this world for Jesus, you will find your life in heaven. What good will it be for someone to gain the whole world yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? My thought when reading that was, the stories of people selling their soul to the devil and stuff for things here on earth. And it's like, man, they are getting the raw end of the deal, right? Wow, the soul is worth so much more than that. Son of Man is going to come in his Father's glory with his angels, and then he will reward each person according to what they have done. Truly I tell you, some who are standing here will not taste death before they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. That's kind of hard to believe. Who didn't die before they see the Son of Man? This could mean a couple different things. But there are stories of, people in the Bible not dying and just being taken up to heaven before they die. So possible, and they also talk about, death as falling asleep. So that's, a possibility as well. A couple different things there. So that's about it. Wow. We had about 40 minutes today. Exciting stuff. Definitely important lessons for us to learn. And kind of gives us rounding out more of the template of Christ, how we're supposed to live. And the fact that we are just like the disciples, where, we see things over and over, and it takes us a while to figure it out. And probably because we are used to and conditioned to living the way of man and not focusing on, pleasing God and how to please God. And that takes a transition. It takes a transformation, believing in Christ, accepting him, and then, starting your transition. And it takes a while, especially for some people. It takes longer than others. So excellent. All right. Well, God bless you all. Thank you so much for stopping by. I'm excited, like I said, about, moving forward with my job opportunity. I'll keep you guys updated on that. And that is it for today's episode. We'll be here tomorrow. Tomorrow is Friday, the last day of the week. And then after that, we'll be back the next Monday. And just thankful for you guys coming through. If you're watching this on the VOD, please leave a comment if you have anything interesting, anything. I just want to start conversations and build relationships with people. So thanks again. This has been an episode of Reading Through the Bible. I'm Carl, and we'll see you next time, 10 a.m. tomorrow morning, Friday. All right, we'll see you then.